History moves in cycles. Powers rise, the people push back. After the Civil War, America was drowning in debt. Farmers and workers knew they needed economic justice. Entered the Greenback Party of the 1870s, a movement demanding paper money instead of gold. Why? More money in circulation means an easier life for the poor, but big businesses crushed the movement. Then came the populists, led by the firebrand William Jennings Bryan, who gave his famous Cross of the Gold speech in 1896. He said, "You shall not crucify mankind on a cross of gold," a warning that prioritized gold-backed currency would break the backs of working people. His defeat cemented the gold standard, locking America into an economy that favored industrialists over farmers. The urban-rural divide has always existed in America. But what does it mean when the forces of money and power determine the future of a nation? Follow along as we discover what's next in the epic story of America. Welcome to Orbits and Oracles, a griot's guide to history. Imperialism and the Philippine War. In 1898, the U.S. liberated the Philippines from Spain, but instead of granting independence, America annexed the islands, sparking a brutal war. Philippine leader Emilio Aguinaldo fought back in a brutal guerrilla war. The U.S. response? Scorched earth policies, concentration camps, and mass civilian casualties. Let's do a quick reminder of what imperialism is. Imperialism is when a nation extends its power over foreign lands, often through military force or political control. America wasn't just an up-and-coming democracy anymore. It was an empire. Even W.E.B. Du Bois, watching from the United States, called out the hypocrisy. America denies freedom abroad and at home. America was expanding, but at what cost? Power without justice leads to spiritual and moral decay, which leads us to our first orbit reflection. What happens when a nation builds its legacy on control instead of liberation? Enter Theodore Roosevelt, the cowboy president. He was a force of nature, tackling corruption head on. Conservation. Roosevelt preserved millions of acres of land, creating national parks. His trust busting, he took on corporate giants, breaking monopolies up with the Sherman Antitrust Act. His foreign policy, Roosevelt's corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, declared America the policeman of the Western Hemisphere. Roosevelt was a paradox. He dined with Booker T. Washington, the first Black man invited to eat dinner at the White House, but also reinforced segregation laws. Meanwhile, W.E.B. Du Bois and other Black intellectuals founded the NAACP in 1909 to demand immediate rights, not gradual change. Which leads me to the question, can real progress come from the top down? Or does transformation only happen when the people rise up? As Roosevelt stepped aside, William Howard Taft took a different approach, the dollar diplomacy, using money, not military, to control Latin America. But money is just another weapon, isn't it? Let's explore the philosophy behind the dollar diplomacy. Instead of relying solely on military force, Taft and his Secretary of State Philander C. Knox encouraged American businessmen to invest in foreign markets, especially in politically unstable nations. The goal: secure U.S. economic interests, keep European powers out, and reinforce American dominance. Rather than sending troops, the U.S. pushed private banks to issue loans and develop infrastructure abroad. In theory, this would stabilize struggling nations. In reality, it made them economically dependent on the U.S. In 1912, Taft justified his approach, stating the diplomacy of the present administration has sought to respond to modern ideas by substituting the dollar for bullets. But let's be real. Dollar diplomacy wasn't just economic goodwill. It was strategic imperialism. American businesses thrived while foreign nations fell deeper into financial control. And when money didn't work, the Marines stepped in. Latin America became ground zero for the dollar diplomacy. The U.S. feared that if countries defaulted on European loans, European powers would intervene, violating the Monroe Doctrine, which warned against European influence in the Western Hemisphere. The solution: American money with strings attached. Nicaragua in 1911, a prime example. A political crisis threatened American investments. Taft's administration backed a coup against President Jose Santos Zelaya. The U.S. propped up a new leader, Adolfo Diaz, and secured a massive loan, giving American banks control over Nicaragua's customs revenue. But resentment grew, leading to U.S. military occupation that lasted for years. In Honduras, the U.S. restructured Honduras' debt by replacing European loans with American ones, reducing British influence. But this only deepened Honduras' dependency on U.S. corporations, especially for the United Fruit Company, which would go on to dominate Central America's economy. The same thing happened in the Dominican Republic and Haiti. The U.S. took control of their custom houses, ensuring American creditors got paid before local governments could use their own revenue. Now, this left local farmers and businesses struggling while U.S. interests thrived. The message is clear. If you couldn't pay, the U.S. would take over. Now, Taft also tried to expand the dollar diplomacy into China. Hoping to challenge European and Japanese influence, the U.S. pushed for investors in railroads and infrastructure, believing that economic ties would secure American interests and promote Chinese stability. But in Manchuria, American efforts to participate in a railroad project was blocked by China, Japan, and Russia. Unlike in Latin America, U.S. money couldn't buy influence over here, and the policy collapsed. And here's the irony. Dollar diplomacy was meant to prevent conflict, but it led to the same result as military intervention. Many nations saw U.S. financial control as a new form of imperialism, sparking backlash. In Nicaragua, financial control turned into occupation. In China, resistance shut down the U.S. completely. Then came Woodrow Wilson, who oversaw massive changes. Woodrow Wilson abandoned the dollar diplomacy in favor of moral diplomacy, arguing that the U.S. foreign policy should promote democracy and self-determination instead of economic coercion. But let's be real. American intervention didn't stop. It just took a different form. Woodrow Wilson enacted the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, creating a central bank to stabilize America's economy. He was pulled into World War I in 1917 after Germany sank the Lusitania, and then Zimmerman sent the telegraph to Mexico, telling them to attack America. Wilson pushed America into the war, claiming it was to make the world safe for democracy. Of course, again, let's be clear. Black soldiers like the legendary Harlem Hellfighters fought for democracy abroad, but returned to the U.S. to a red summer in 1919 of lynchings and race riots. Meanwhile, women's wartime labor helped secure the 19th Amendment in 1920, granting them the right to vote. Which leads us to our final orbit reflection. War often promises transformation, but who gets left behind when the dust settles? So, what did this era reveal? Progressivism. Progressivism expanded government power, sometimes for the people, sometimes against them. Imperialism made America a global force, but at the cost of Filipino, Cuban, and Puerto Rican sovereignty. World War I changed the game for women and Black Americans, but justice remained elusive. As we move into our next episode, I want you to reflect and think about what cycles of power do you see today, who benefits, and who resists. Happy reading!